Some places make you stop before you have taken a single step. This is one of them. We are standing on a narrow ribbon of pavement, carved into the side of a sheer rock wall, high above the largest freshwater lake on Earth. Below us, the water runs out to a flat blue horizon that could just as easily be an ocean. Behind us, the cliff rises, dark and stubborn and impossibly old. This is Silver Creek Cliff, on the north shore of Lake Superior, on a bright, cool afternoon in early October. And this quiet path we are walking on today was, for 70 years, one of the most dangerous stretches of highway in Minnesota. Come with me, and I will show you why. Let me show you exactly where we are, because the geography here matters. We are in the far northeast of Minnesota, on the rugged shoulder of Lake Superior, a few miles up the shore from the little harbor town of Two Harbors, and about 30 miles northeast of the port city of Duluth. From here, the land does not roll gently down to the water the way it does on most lakes. Instead, it drops. The shore is a wall of hard volcanic rock, and Silver Creek Cliff is one of the tallest of those walls, a great headland of stone standing more than 100 feet straight up out of the waves. There was only one narrow shelf of level ground to build a road on, and it ran right along the edge. Before we talk about roads and cliffs, look out at the water itself, because this is no ordinary lake. Lake Superior holds about 1/10 of all the fresh surface water on the planet. It is so vast, so cold, and so deep that it behaves less like a lake and more like an inland sea, raising its own weather and its own waves. The Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe people whose homeland surrounds these shores, gave it a name that fits perfectly. They call it Gichigami, and in the Ojibwe language, the pieces of that word mean, quite simply, the great water. When you stand up here and watch that horizon curve away with no far shore in sight, you understand exactly why. This is the great water, and everything on this coast has been shaped by it. So why is this shore a wall of rock instead of a gentle beach? The answer begins about 1.1 billion years ago, a span of time so deep it is hard to even imagine. Back then, the very heart of the North American continent began to tear itself apart. A vast crack, which geologists call the Midcontinent Rift, opened in a giant curve stretching from here all the way down toward Kansas and around toward Ohio. As the crust pulled apart, enormous floods of runny, molten lava welled up and poured out across the land, flow upon flow upon flow, for millions of years. In this basin alone, those hardened lava flows stacked up into a pile of rock miles thick. The rift never fully split the continent, but it left behind this cradle of stone, and that cradle eventually filled with water to become Lake Superior. Reach out and put your hand on the cliff, and you are touching that ancient fire directly. This dark, heavy iron-gray stone is basalt, the rock that cooled and hardened out of those billion-year-old lava flows. Basalt is tough. It resists the pounding of the waves, it resists the freezing and thawing of 1,000 brutal winters, and it does not surrender easily to anything, including the people who later tried to build a highway across it. That is the whole reason this coast stands up so tall and so sheer. Softer rock would have crumbled into slopes and sand long ago. This stone simply refused, and so it left the North Shore with these dramatic headlands, these cliffs that plunge straight into the cold water, beautiful to look at and very, very hard to cross. Long before any road clung to this cliff, this whole coast was, and still is, the homeland of the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe people. For centuries they lived along the Great Water, moving by birch bark canoe from bay to bay, fishing the cold depths, gathering wild rice in the shallow inland lakes, and tapping the maples in spring. The lake was not an obstacle to them, but a highway, a provider, and a sacred presence all at once. They read its moods, they respected its dangers, and they traveled it with a skill that later newcomers could only marvel at. When you look at this rugged shore and think about how hard it was to build across, it is worth remembering that people thrived here for a very long time by working with the water instead of trying to conquer the stone. Now to the road, and to the sheer nerve it took to build it. In the early 1920s, Minnesota decided to push a scenic highway all the way up this wild coast, but at Silver Creek Cliff there was almost nowhere to put it. So in 1923 and 1924, crews did the only thing they could. They blasted a narrow shelf directly into the face of the cliff, roughly 125 feet above the surface of the lake. Picture the work. Men hanging on that rock wall, drilling and setting charges, prying loose the same stubborn basalt we just touched, chipping out a ledge just wide enough for cars, with nothing below them but open air and cold water. When it was finished, it was a marvel, and one of the most breathtaking drives in the country. It was also a trap. For the next 70 years, this cliff-hugging ledge carried all of Highway 61 up the North Shore, and every mile of it held its breath. On the lakeside, the only thing standing between a moving car and a long fall into Lake Superior was a low stone wall, little more than a curb. On the other side, the cliff itself loomed directly over the pavement, and it was always shedding. Frost would work into the cracks in the basalt, pry loose slabs and boulders, and send them tumbling down onto the road without warning. Drivers crept along this shelf in fog, in blowing snow, in the blinding glare off the water, hoping nothing was falling and nothing was stopped around the next blind curve. It was spectacular, and it was frightening, and by the end everyone agreed it could not last. By the late 1980s, the engineers had reached a bold conclusion. They would not try to widen the ledge or armor the cliff any longer. Instead, they would go straight through the mountain. In August of 1991, work began on a tunnel that would carry the highway clean through the solid rock of Silver Creek Cliff, safely behind the crumbling outer face, away from the falling boulders and the deadly edge. It was an enormous undertaking. Crews drilled and blasted their way into the same billion-year-old basalt, foot by careful foot, boring 2 lanes of highway right through the heart of the headland. For 3 long years the work went on, and the sound of blasting echoed out across the water. The numbers are staggering. To carve this passage, workers drilled, blasted, and hauled away roughly 1 million cubic yards of rock, enough stone to bury a football field many times over. When it was finally done, in July of 1994, the Silver Creek Cliff Tunnel stretched 1,344 feet through the mountain, a smooth, straight, well-lit passage where there had once been only a terrifying ledge. Traffic that had crawled along the cliff edge for 70 years now flowed safely through the rock in a matter of seconds. It was a triumph of stubborn engineering answering stubborn stone, and it changed this stretch of the North Shore forever. This tunnel is a genuine rarity. Minnesota is a state of prairies, forests, and gentle terrain, a place that almost never needs to bore a highway through solid rock. In fact, there are only 2 highway tunnels in the whole state, and both of them are right here on this same wild stretch of the North Shore. The other, the Lafayette Bluff Tunnel, sits just a few miles farther up the coast, punched through another one of these unyielding basalt headlands. Together, they stand as monuments to just how rugged this shoreline really is. Everywhere else in Minnesota, the road simply bends around the hill. Here twice, the only sensible answer was to go straight through it. And here is the best part of the whole story, the part we are actually walking on right now. When the tunnel opened and the cars moved inside the mountain, that old, dangerous, breathtaking ledge did not just get bulldozed away. It got a second life. The abandoned road grade, clinging to the cliff 125 feet above the lake, was reborn as a paved walking and biking path, a segment of the Gitchi Gami State Trail. So the very ledge that once terrified a generation of drivers is now one of the most peaceful and beautiful walks on the entire North Shore. All the danger has been engineered away, and all that is left is the view. We get to stroll, slowly and safely, exactly where the traffic used to hold its breath. It is worth remembering why anyone was in such a hurry along this coast in the first place, and for that we look just down the shore to 2 harbors. This rugged country turned out to be the doorway to a treasure. In 1884, the very first shipment of iron ore ever to leave the state of Minnesota rolled down to the water at Agate Bay in 2 harbors, hauled by a brand new railroad from the mines of the Vermilion Range inland. Great wooden docks were built out into the lake, and ore boats came to carry that iron away to the steel mills that would build a nation. The North Shore was never only about scenery. It was a working coast, a place where the ancient rock beneath our feet in the form of iron helped forge the modern world. Today, Highway 61, the road that once clung so precariously to this cliff, is one of the most beloved scenic drives in America. It runs for more than 150 miles up the shore of Lake Superior, past waterfalls and lighthouses and state parks, from Duluth all the way to the Canadian border. In early October, like today, it is at its absolute finest. The birch and aspen on the hillsides turn to gold, the maples flare into deep red and orange, and all of it burns against the cold, endless blue of the great water. People come from all over the country just to drive this shore in autumn. And of all the dramatic moments along the whole route, few beat the one where the road simply vanishes into the heart of Silver Creek Cliff. And so we come to the Overlook itself, the reward at the end of the old road. From up here, the view opens all the way out. The great water fills the whole eastern sky, so wide and so flat that you can actually sense the curve of the earth on its horizon. Below us, the waves roll in against the base of the basalt, the same patient work of erosion that has been going on for 10,000 years since the glaciers melted away. Gulls ride the updraft along the cliff face. The autumn woods glow gold and crimson on the headlands stretching away to the northeast. It is quiet now, deeply quiet, and it is almost impossible to believe that a river of anxious traffic once inched along this very spot. The cliff kept its danger, but it gave up its view. 1 billion years of fire and stone, 10,000 years of wind and wave, a homeland, a treasure, a terrifying road, and finally a tunnel through the mountain. All of it gathered here on one quiet ledge above Lake Superior. That is the gift of a place like Silver Creek Cliff. It looks, at first glance, like a simple, pretty view. But every layer of it, the rock, the water, the people, the road, is a story a very long time in the making. I am glad you came out to walk this old cliff edge with me, in the gold light of an October afternoon. There is a whole shoreline of places like this still waiting up the road, so stay with me, and I will see you at the next one.